Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars: A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast grim dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath Robinson. I'll be your host. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. Welcome to Table Talk. I hope you are having a good evening. Hope you had a fantastic day today and that it was productive. Tonight, we are continuing a discussion that we've been having across multiple different people or with multiple different people across multiple different episodes on the nature of good and evil with a specific eye toward what that means for storytelling. And with me tonight as a guest is famed member of the community, James Bacon. So he's one of the favorites who you often see in the chat. And here he is on the stream tonight. Welcome, James.
I appreciate the introduction. I don't know how favorite I am, but I'm certainly well known.
I'm really glad to have you here with me tonight.
I'm very happy to be here.
Let's see. We've got Drudenfuzz who was just bringing that up. Wait a minute. Isn't James Bacon one of the guys who is leaving comments? Yes, yeah. That's exactly right. So
where does jerk come from?
We've got Phaser Wrist. Good evening, Phaser Wrist. Oh, new computer. Oh, all right. New computer on Phaser Wrist. This is Adrian, who we have had on the show. So that is great. And I just read this. Phaser Wrist, Adrian says, I'm so happy I'm making my new book, The Great Fiction Cheat Sheet, a Stomping Kittens companion free for everyone here all day this Saturday. All right. Well, I'll put it up and make sure everybody knows, especially this Saturday on the morning grind and all of that. Phaserist, you make me feel so terrible about myself because you are so productive and I am not. Like Phaserist already has another book. I will say that I was, I don't have the sheet sitting here, but I was working on brainstorming according to your book, Stomping Kittens, this afternoon, and realized I'm going in completely the wrong direction. I'm gonna have to throw this out again. But Zero the Blade says, if I recall, James, didn't you welcome Zero the Blade? Didn't you do a lot of religious studies at one point? You can.
Once upon a time, I was an ordained minister, but no longer.
Oh, you were? Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Robert is here. Good evening, Robert. Oh, we got Japperds here. Good evening. All right. Good evening, everyone. So, James, do you want to introduce yourself? Why don't you introduce yourself first? Let's start with that.
Sure. I'm just some, bald schlub on the internet. I'm in the comments frequently. You can find me on the Discord. I don't really have that big of a footprint or a presence, but I'm reachable on Discord if anyone has any questions or I don't know, wants to talk. That's where
I should post that Raven Keep Discord link. If you are here and you are watching, Raven Keep Discord link. I'm putting that an invite in the comments right now. So if you're not part of that link just went into the comments right now. So yes, you can get in touch with James if you need to through that. Let's see. Let me show you what's going on before we get started into our main topic. Let's see. Oh, Druden Fuzz says, Heath, you would be more productive if you take time for other things than just these many hours long streams. But I'm not complaining. Yes, I know people have brought that up quite a bit. That has been like, I'm just not getting anything done. And I'll say that after I spend 6 hours talking about the first 35 minutes of Star Trek 6 on a live stream. So yes, I know. That is a problem. Because often in my mind, I don't actually think of doing the morning grind or even sometimes doing the table talks is like getting something done during the day because this is like my fun time. Like, what do I want to do? Like the whole reason that I was doing table talk to begin with is because I saw people having great conversations on the internet. As I was just sitting here in the house, and I was like, I want to have great conversations on the internet. So the live streams are my fun time. So I think of my productivity as things that are not happening on the live streams. But yes, point taken.
Well, they certainly are fun.
So let's see here. So things that are coming up, I just want to point out. Where did here it is. So this Sunday in 2 days, December 3rd at 1:00 p.m., Brianna, I'll be re-airing my discussion with Brianna about Scarface. And we're specifically talking about the fall discussion with Brianna here on the Table Talk channel. So this is, if you're watching on Heath's Geekverse, we are dual streaming, but we're trying to move Table Talk to its own channel and establish it. So hopefully you're coming over to the Table Talk channel to subscribe. We have over 600 subscribers now, by the way. We had over 500 when we talked to Doug 2 days ago. We got over 600 now. So we're growing here. But discussion with Brianna on Scarface will be re-aired. So that was one that was originally shot on the Heath's Geekverse channel, but it's now private. And now I will re-air it on Sunday at 1:00 p.m. We were talking about the fall corruption arcs. That's a favorite topic of both of ours, which relates to what we're talking about tonight. And so that will re-air. Please click that link, click the notify me. That's at 1:00 on Sunday. And then on Tuesday, 4 days, December 5th, 7:00 p.m., we're going to have a discussion on the Christmas story. Oh, it looks like the banners kind of cover up the word story, but that's the Christmas story. Doug will be here. Brianna will be here. Cameron Pashaw will also be here. So this is the all-star panel to talk about the Christmas story from the perspective, from a literary perspective, from a religious perspective, from a story structure perspective. Cameron's going to be bringing an Islamic perspective on this. I'm going to ask him what material we need to review. I'm also going to be talking about my story, The Trial of St. Gabriel, since I was adapting the Christmas story to my story, The Trial of St. Gabriel. So all of that's happening on Tuesday. I'll put this link out here, Christmas story. I hope to see you for that. This is going to be a great discussion, I think. I mean, all of us are going to be there. This is a fantastic topic. So that's coming up on Tuesday. And by the way, so my short story, which James has read, James is one of the beta readers, of course, he's read the entire thing, The Trial of St. Gabriel, which is my dark short story of the Christmas Massacre. That is on Kickstarter right now, and digital copies are only $4. So if you hit that link and you just pledge for $4, I'll send you a digital copy. And actually, once I'm rebuilding all of the, I started working on that, just started working on rebuilding all of the files this afternoon. Before the show on Tuesday, because I want anybody who wants to have an opportunity to read the story to have that opportunity. If you pledge on Kickstarter, even though the Kickstarter isn't finished yet, if you pledge before this weekend, I'm going to send out a soft copy, a PDF copy of The Trial of St. Gabriel to anybody who's pledged for one of the ebooks this weekend. It's just a short story. That way you can read the short story and be prepared for Tuesday. We'll be talking about St. Matthew, St. Mark, the Christmas story in them, but also mine. So if you want to do a little bit of reading before the conversation on Tuesday, pledge to the Kickstarter. It's only $4 for a digital copy. I'll send you the digital copy this weekend, and then you can read it and be prepared for the whole discussion on Tuesday. All right. What else do we need to say before we get started, before we actually dive into this?
I will mention that I am not a Catholic.
Okay.
So please don't come at me. There are a great many injustices that have been perpetrated by the Catholic Church. I am aware of them. I do not defend them. I am not a Catholic. I'm just well versed in the catechism and Catholic belief.
Okay. And I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church. So even though I don't think you can actually stop being a member of the Episcopal Church. So I think I'm technically an inactive member of the Episcopal Church. So
yeah, I think that's correct. The Catholic Church, you can stop being a member in good standing of, but you have to specifically petition your bishop for your parish. And you can tell them, hey, I'm no longer a member of the church, and then you're off the roll. But unless you do that, you are forever an inactive member of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, maybe there is some way to do some like a specific petition too, but I'm not sure. So I would imagine I'm inactive. But also, I was going to say, why are we even having this discussion tonight? I wanted to frame this discussion in a certain way. Now we can go whatever direction we need it to go and talk about whatever we're going to be talking about tonight. And in the comments, we'll be responding to comments and things like that as well. But the purpose for having this discussion wasn't to just have a theological discussion, which although that could be completely fun and something that we could have. But the reason that this topic had even kind of come up with on Table Talk, I guess, is for a couple of reasons. First, I was researching orcs and orcishness and the development of orcs through fantasy on one of my other YouTube channels, and so I was trying to understand historically the relationships between orcs and evil. And the way that they're portrayed in fantasy. And I guess that was kind of a genesis of this idea, because I started asking people who are guests on Table Talk about their opinions on orcs and orcishness and the relationship with evil and so forth. And then that kind of also got brought into the religious side of things, because Brianna and I are interested in writing stories of the fall and corruption. And we're going to talk about that. We talk about that on our discussion of Scarface, which will come on, we re-air on Sunday. I'm very interested in telling stories of the fall. She's very interested in telling stories of the fall. James and I just read one of Brianna's draft manuscripts that starts to tell that kind of story. And so if you're going to say, if we're interested in writing a story of the fall, I would say we're taking, at least for me, we're taking a character who is an ultimate good guy. And then through this process of storytelling, we're going to make that person the ultimate bad guy. So if you want to talk about ultimate good and ultimate evil, you need some type of understanding about what good and evil are, which of course different theological perspectives have different things on. And specifically it's religious to me because the character I want to write about is Lucifer. So that's a directly religious kind of thing. So I wanted to set that up, and that's why we're having this discussion for anybody who is coming in and might not be following the entire. This is episode 67 of Table Talk chronologically, because we've had this conversation on several different episodes. But if you're just coming in, that's why we're trying to talk about this. James, you want to just pick it up? Where do you want to start? I'm going to turn it over to you. I've done too much talking, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Where do you want to start, and what do you want to talk about?
Well, I guess we can just start with the general Catholic perspective on evil, because I think that it ties really nicely in with orcs and some things that Tolkien wrote about with regard to the orcs, especially after Sauron's defeat. So I think that's a really natural place to start. So the Catholic Catechism, I will read the in brief because it's a little bit easier to understand. So in brief, with regard to good acts and evil acts.
Oh, you mean to bring this up?
Oh, sure.
Okay. This is this section?
Yep. And it's at the very bottom. So that in brief piece.
Oh, in brief. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually longer than the extended version, which is funny, but I didn't write it. So the object, the intention, and the circumstances make up the three sources of morality of human acts. The object chosen morally specifies the act of willing accordingly as reason recognizes and judges it good or evil. An even action cannot be justified by reference to a good intention, and that comes from Thomas Aquinas, which we can certainly get into later. The end does not justify the means, essentially. A morally good act requires the goodness of its object, of its end, and of its circumstances together. And there are concrete acts that it is always wrong to choose because their choice entails a disorder of the will or a moral evil. And this we will have to go into Thomas Aquinas first, as far as the ordering of the will and moral evils and whatnot. But one may not do evil so that good is a result from it. So there are three essential components to an action and whether or not it can be determined to be good or evil: the object, the intention, and the circumstance. So if you intend to give to the poor, that's the object.
Okay, I think defining those three things.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. So if you intend to give to the poor, which in and of itself is a good act, and the result of the action is the poor have received the money and can, get essential items or in some way are lifted up by your donation, but the intention is impure, you want to donate to the poor, and this is from the perspective of the Catholic Church, so please don't hang me out to dry on this, but if the intention of your action is to be seen by other men as being magnanimous or as being contributing to the poor, the act in and of itself is an evil act because the three do not align. But if you give to the poor and the poor are lifted up and your reason is good, so you want to give to the poor because you've been given a penance to give to the poor, because God says to give to the poor, because you just want to do it in secret because it's the good thing to do and it's not necessarily going to demonstrate to the world and it's not going to have you receive accolades, then the whole of the action, because of the three conditions have been met to be good, is a good action. Good and evil within the Catholic Church is because this is specifically with regard to actions. Good, and I guess we'll have to get into Thomas Aquinas now, unless there's things that you want to bring up prior to going over to Thomas Aquinas.
Okay, so this would be let's make sure we got good examples here.
Sure.
So in this case, the object, I'm making notes myself, giving to the poor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the reason you did that is the intention.
Yeah.
Okay, and this could be, like, for instance, you said, let's say, increase your public status.
Yes.
Because you want to be seen given that.
Mm-hmm.
Then increasing your public status is not good. So that's going to make your whole act not good.
Yes. It doesn't necessarily make the act evil. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room because sometimes the official teachings of the Catholic Church are not comprehensive. But it certainly does discount the fact that even two of the criteria are good, but the one that isn't good nullifies the action as being a truly good action.
Well, I like that potentially, and like I said, I'm not sure if this is in the Catholic Catechism, but in like American justice, we've got guilty and innocent. You can be guilty or innocent, but you can also be not guilty, which doesn't exactly mean that you are innocent, but it means that, well, you're not guilty. So that's not, so you're saying there could potentially be a situation where, well, you didn't do, you did give to the poor and you got people fed, but you did it for the wrong reason. So that wasn't necessarily, might not necessarily be evil.
Right.
But you don't get to count that as good.
Yes, correct. You don't get to count that as good.
And likewise, if the only reason you're putting money in the collection plate is because you feel guilted into it.
Yeah. I don't know. See, I haven't necessarily applied like the Catholic morality to tithing. Okay. You're commanded by God to tithe, and it has been
let's
said.
Not specifically say tithing. Let's just say give money to the soup kitchen. You just feel guilted into doing that. Mm-hmm, so it was. I'm not trying to up my own status, but I also kind of did it kind of grudgingly because I feel guilty if people are going to guilt me if I don't. You don't.
Yes, if people are going to guilt you if you don't, then it's certainly for an external show. If you are going to feel guilty for not doing it, I think that it probably still qualifies as a good act, even though your internal motivation was guilt. The fact that you didn't, the intention wasn't to receive anything or wasn't for your own benefit, aside from to alleviate guilt. But
what does circumstances mean in the context of giving to the poor? Then we talked about object, then the giving intention. What does circumstances mean in this context?
I believe that circumstances essentially is equated to the outcome. So the circumstance of the object of the action, the circumstance would be the poor are uplifted.
Okay, so if you did something about if you gave to the poor, but then for some reason that actually had a negative impact on them, that ultimately that was a negative, then it can't be a good act.
Yes. For example, if I gave, and this is completely independent of the motivation of the individual, if I gave money to the poor and I did so in secret to edify the poor and not myself, but as a result, that person got murdered and by another individual and that money stolen from them, because let's say I was feeling particularly generous and gave them $1,000. If they're getting, shanked and someone's stealing that money, the end result, the circumstance is not good. And so the action, while I don't think qualifies as evil because you did not perform an evil act, it's still not good because the end result kind of nullifies the preamble.
Well, what if we're talking about what comes to my mind as a possibility? I don't know if this is what they're talking about here, but brings up is that when you've got the idea of like enabling somebody who is doing something bad. If you've got good intentions and you have a good object, but instead of actually getting this person out of the circumstances that they're in, ultimately all you're doing is enabling them. Maybe that's the circumstances that, you did give them food, whatever, you gave them money, but
that's a better example. That's a much better example. Yes.
Okay.
Especially if you have foreknowledge of that enablement, then I would say that's probably a better example. It's definitely a better example.
Okay.
To answer Christopher Wren Griffin Jr. This is not about good and evil rooting from Christ.
This one right here. Okay.
Yeah. It is about establishing the Catholic viewpoint so that we can apply it to good and evil in storytelling. So this is not proselytization. This is not preaching. This is not a Catholic or a Christian episode. This is strictly about story and how good and evil via different perspectives can affect those stories that you want to tell, and where those viewpoints come from. So we'll get there. We just have to establish what the viewpoint is first. So please forgive me if it sounds a little preachy.
John, you're right. The American justice system, we've got guilty and not guilty, right? But so I think you're correct here. correcting me in what I was saying. But the one reason you might be not guilty is because you are innocent. But there might be other reasons why you're not guilty. But you're right. You're right that I think technically you're dealing with just guilty and not guilty in the justice system.
Military might actually be a better example because you can get an honorable discharge, a dishonorable discharge, and a general discharge, which is an honorable or dishonorable. You're just out. So that might speak to the point a bit better.
All right. Where do we go from there?
So from there, I think we need to go to Thomas Aquinas, specifically with regard to, well, let's just go there. Okay. So Thomas Aquinas says that good, and this is it's my notes on his text, so it's going to be brief. And it's not, this is where some of the catechism comes from because St. Thomas Aquinas is referenced within the catechism itself. So Thomas Aquinas proposes that good is analogical, which means that there's more than one definition, but all are analogous. Ultimately, good is what we desire or what arouses our desire. And this, of course, stems from his beliefs as far as the nature of man and where that comes from, but just bear with it if you could. So from his perspective, ultimately good is what we desire or what arouses our desire. Our desire springs from our nature, and our nature was ordered toward the image of God, who is the definition of goodness. So that's where that viewpoint comes from. Aquinas doesn't actually define good, but he essentially says that every act of our freedom arises from our original thirst to desire for the good. And this is for having been created in the image of God. If we didn't desire good, we would never choose or will anything. We just wouldn't make any choices. So if something had no goodness whatsoever, it would lack all good, even the good of existence itself. And this is very philosophical, so pardon me, I'm not going to get too far into it. Augustine says of Aquinas, if something were deprived of all goodness, it would be altogether nothing. Therefore, as long as something is, it is good. This is because the opposite of goodness is an evil, but non-existence or incompleteness. And since God exists, existence is necessarily good, thereby causing non-existence to be necessarily evil. I'm going to pause there for a moment to get into orcs because I don't want to go too heavy on the religious stuff because I feel like I'm going to lose people. So, Eru Ilúvatar, the god among gods in Tolkien's mythos, creates the world, Arda, I believe it's called, and he sees that it's good and he likes it. So in a mirror to the biblical God, he creates things, he sees that it's good. So when the orcs are created, they're created by Melkor the Morgoth, and they are created by, a little bit of wiggle room here with regard to how exactly they're created, because there's, Tolkien wrote a bunch of letters after the fact. The one that I prefer is that they were created by Melkor taking the elves who were made of starlight. And that, again, is another thing that's got wiggle room on it. But the one that I prefer is that they were made from starlight and twisting them as a poor reflection of the elves. And so as a result, the things that the orcs were made from started as good. So the orcs themselves, while committing evil acts, they are distanced from essentially their well-ordered purpose. That's what makes them evil, and it's not their own fault. And so, there are a lot of philosophical questions you can ask about once Sauron is defeated, what happens to the orcs? Like, we all know that they all retreat from the world and they eventually kill themselves, but had they the opportunity to reform, they likely would have been able to, because while they are not understood to be good, they are made from what is good. And so I think that is it's sort of the Catholic view of good and evil. So as explained by Aquinas,
Mm-hmm.
the difference between good and evil. And this goes to Pressfield as well. So the difference between who you are and who you're meant to be is resistance. It's the difference of who you are, the difference between your well-ordered nature and your ill-ordered nature is sin or evil. And so I think that, that's contained in Pressfield. I think it's certainly contained in The Lord of the Rings. And so how does that apply to modern storytelling? I guess I'll let you ask the questions from there.
So that's interesting because there are, Tolkien is not completely clear on some of these points, and so we can get really wrapped up in the technical parts of what did he say in what particular letter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, then you're saying that if you're applying a Catholic perspective to the orcs,
Mm-hmm.
that they would be redeemable.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that I'll let you ask the questions. I don't want to.
No, go ahead. Go.
I'm
I'm
just going to say, the orcs can be redeemed. How? Because they are, they're fallen elves, which is a mirror to fallen angels, kind of, sort of. And they're led by the chief of the fallen in Melkor. How does that Catholic viewpoint apply to demons? Well, unfortunately, there's not really a solid church teaching on that. We know that the official church doctrine in the catechism says who the devil is, what we're referring to, who the demons are, that they are fallen angels, that the third of them did fall from heaven and they did follow Satan or the devil or whatever name you want to use for them. But as far as redemption potential, doesn't say anything about that. And this is official Catholic teaching, and it sort of exists apart from the Bible, but it's rooted in the Bible. So there's other things that it's rooted in, like Thomas Aquinas.
Well, and they're also tradition is also
tradition is a big deal. The magisterium is a big deal.
Yeah.
So it's not just the Bible by which, and that kind of gets on some people's. It raises some people's hackles because there's it just. It tends to raise hackles, but I'll just leave it at that. It's not we're not getting into all that.
I'm starring some comments as they're coming by.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
John is enjoying this. John says, "You're not losing me. This kind of philosophical and theological discussion fascinates me, especially connecting it to storytelling and Tolkien." And then later, John says, James agreed. I was always raised very Catholic, that even the most egregious sins can be forgiven if one is truly remorseful and seeks confession and penance.
Yes.
It's interesting here. I don't think I had completely yet connected an orc to a fallen angel, but that's an interesting kind of thing. It seems like something that Melkor did something to the elves, which caused them to become an orc.
Yes.
Generally, like I said, without getting into detail of this.
Yeah, and the orcs technically aren't really the angel analog, but yes.
But whereas when you're talking about angels and fallen angels, that often seems to be presented as more of a choice. They made a choice.
Yeah.
And now they are out.
Yes. And so to address what Drudenfuzz says, I have a feeling that people usually deny orcs moral agency. I would not necessarily agree with that, because I think that people do ascribe moral agency to the orcs. They just consistently condemn them as being evil. I would say that there's not a compassion in the moral agency ascribed to the orcs. And that's, I find, as a non-Catholic, as a non-Christian, as an atheist, I find that Catholicism, for these reasons, a very compassionate sort of institution, at least a religious institution, because it's not the person that is inherently evil in some way. It's simply the gap between your well-ordered will and your ill-ordered will. And anything in between, we all fall short, et cetera, et cetera. So anything in between can be forgiven, and anything in between, that's where the whole, Christ and sacrifice thing comes from. I'm really trying to keep this not religious, but I really sound preachy right now, so please bear with me. But like that whole gap issue is what is being shored up in the sacrifice of the Christmas story and the crucifixion, from two. So it's never like, it's very easy to say X person is evil or Y person is evil. And there are severely evil acts that people can commit, right? Like Hitler, way far away from his well-ordered will. But in the Catholic perspective, I probably picked a bad example. You can repent of any egregious sin and be forgiven if you mean it. If you repent, there are certain actions you need to undergo as prescribed by a priest who receives your confession, because confession is a sacrament. You can't just be sorry in the Catholic Church. You don't just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." No, that's not how it works in the Catholic Church. Forgiveness, confession is a sacrament that you must receive. It is ordered by a priest, and it is a very sort of methodical, sort of ritualized thing that some Catholics participate in weekly because they know it's not good enough to just say, well, that stunk. I was a bad person a week ago. Let me just not do that again and I'll be okay. That's not how it works.
John, actually, I like this. John says, I think the fallen angel allegory would apply well to Sauron. Yes, you're probably.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Maiar and the
Maiar. Because that has something more, that seems to imply more to do with choice, like we're talking about that you fall, lesser divine being opposed to Valar, of which Melkor was one. And
the reason that I went from orcs to fallen angels is because of that unknown in the Catholic teaching. So in the Catholic teaching, you can be forgiven for any sin, no matter how egregious, as long as you do go about the proper rituals and undertake the proper sacraments and are appropriately contrite and you receive the just punishment for, et cetera, et cetera. But no one knows about like angels and demons, right? So demons in the Catholic Church are fallen angels. So like they're angels, they were made good. God smiled upon them and then they sinned. Can they go back to heaven? I don't know. It's not an official church teaching. There are several sects of Christianity that will say no, they are forever divorced because they knew the presence of God and chose against it. But it never actually is taught in Catholic teaching. Well, yes, Robert's correct. We know that from the Bible and the book of Revelation, they never seek redemption. But that doesn't mean that we can't still go through the philosophical exercise of considering if they did seek it, would it be granted? It's just not there in the teaching.
One of the things with orcs to me that it came up as I was studying this, and that this is going back to one of the original questions that I had, which is what sparked this entire conversation with a lot of people, was using orcs in storytelling, like in fantasy literature, to explore our relationship with the demonic.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I was tracing throughout the history of the development of orcs through a bunch of different properties, whether that's a tabletop role-playing game or tabletop war games, and also computer games and such, that orcs have become increasingly human. When orcs start out, they are, the word and the term predate Tolkien for, the underworld and such. But when we get to Tolkien, there is very much a demonic element about them. And so what are you supposed to do as a hero when you are confronted by an orc? Like I said, you don't, hey, let me make it a sandwich and let me see if I can, get it on my, the orc is something demonic that is to be combated.
Yes.
And that's at least one major thoroughfare of this. And so what does it mean to be heroic? Because combating the demonic is not easy. Like if you take that seriously, if you take the idea of the demonic seriously, whether or not you believe in it, let's say physically or not, like whether or not even you believe there is actually a hell with a devil in it and demons in it. Let's say that you're still taking the concept as an atheist of something like demonic seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Even combating that is not easy in life.
Mm-mm.
And so if you're going to tell the story about good and evil and heroes and orcs, the proper relationship, and when you're fighting an orc, that's not going to be an easy thing. But that's what heroes do. What does that mean for us if we have changed the orcs if we've actually humanized the orcs? Actually, this is the phrase that I always use, because people often say, don't demonize people. Completely justly. If you've got somebody who has some kind of differing opinion than you, they might have that different opinion on that subject, but that doesn't mean that they're evil. Don't demonize some person. We hear that all the time. But I don't often hear the flip of that, which is maybe we shouldn't humanize the demonic. And when I was studying the orcs and the changing of orcs, the evolution of orcs over the past, say, 50 years or 70 years, it really struck me that I was telling a history of the humanization of the demonic. And I was wondering if that could be a bad thing.
That's a very, very incredibly deep question. Here's what I think the Catholic teaching is on that and their perspective. I think that the justification of evil is, according to them, this isn't a personal view, I think that justifying the evil actions that they undergo, so the disorder of wills, the justification of that is evil, in the Catholic perspective. I think that, so let's just start with exorcism. Let's just bust it out the door. So exorcism is a sacramental within the church, the Catholic Church. A sacramental is different from a sacrament in that sacraments were ordered by Christ. You can point in the text of the Bible everywhere that he says these certain things, and they have become sacraments, be they holy orders or confession or the Eucharist, etc., etc. A sacramental is something that was ordered by the church. So the church considers exorcism to be a sacramental, and exorcism can only be performed by a priest of sufficient orders. So it's, as a human, and this is going to be, I think, very much at odds with a hero's journey or a hero's story. The hero in the Catholic regard would not fight the demon. The hero in the Catholic regard, unless they are a priest and have been ordained to do so, the hero, the common man rising up to encounter evil, I think the proper Catholic response is compassion and pity, and then possibly also martyrdom. So there's not really a lot with regard to the teachings in the Catholic Church regarding how to, deal with demons, aside from, the actual practice of exorcism, which is only available to a priest of sufficient orders. So you, as a regular individual, like, how are you supposed to handle that? Well, you're supposed to probably handle that with like intercession, so like prayer. But like outside of that, you're not going to go and kill the guy, because as far as like you can't perform a immoral action or an evil action, because that in and of itself is evil. So you don't get it good for doing evil. So you can't go and murder someone or, kill in order to arrive at good. So the killing in and of itself is likely evil. So that's that. That is the perspective on fighting or killing evil. There's also like a self-defense sort of issue that comes up in this, and I believe, I don't have it handy, but I maybe should have sort of looked into this, but I believe that I don't think there's necessarily any official teaching on self-defense in the Catholic Church, but I think that it's generally accepted as a good thing, because if you don't defend yourself, then the potential for other people standing behind you to get hurt exists. And so you kind of have to fight back, because that then becomes the moral action. So like, it sometimes is difficult to address these topics based on official Catholic teaching, because there's just nothing or very little there. So you kind of have to like just wing it. Or, ask your priest, because it's not just the Bible, but it's also the tradition of the Catholic Church, and you receive the tradition through the magisterium, which is the body of priests, which, if you're confronted by a demon with a gun who wants to shoot your head off, you don't got time for that. So you kind of have to wing it in the moment. But I think that as far as society's reflection and like humanizing demons and that sort of thing, I would say that because there's so much mystery with regard to whether or not they are able to be, whether or not they asked for it. Does someone have a question?
Well, I've been starring questions they go by. So
okay.
When I star them, I can go back to them. So
I got you.
A lot of, if you see something in the comments to address, then absolutely. But I've been starring some questions that when the natural stopping point comes up, we can address.
I may see things, but you know me, I just talk, so I might not.
Do you want to add? Well, here's Phaserist said, I thought that blasphemy was the unforgivable sin. Do you know? You often hear about that. Do you have any comments on the unforgivable sin?
I do. I think it's John and JDM answered the question. It's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit specifically, but there's really not much else explained in the text what that means. Is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit refusing to receive it, refusing to believe in it? Is it maligning it vocally? It's just, the one unforgivable sin is blaspheming the Holy Spirit, and your guess is as good as mine as far as what that means.
The Phaserist also brings up like zombies, reminds me of zombies. We're talking about opponents, and no point in getting emotional when attacking them because they're zombies are a good bad guy to fight if you don't want to deal with moral issues.
Yes, completely agree.
Jafford says the idea that orcs can be evil but forgivable, redeemable sounds interesting. It's a strange middle ground between good and evil. Well, that's more like it makes it more like humans.
It does. It certainly lends a level of humanity to the orcs. And I think that, like if you're forced to choose to defend yourself, because in the situation of Middle Earth, you either stand between the orcs and everybody else, or literally everyone in the world dies. So like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? I think that you go and stand up to the orcs. I think that that's the morally correct thing to do. But as far as like the orcs themselves, that I don't think they're innately evil. I think that according to the Catholic perspective, I don't think that they're innately evil. I think that they have sort of a redemptive quality. And this is, again, based on things that Tolkien has written and how I prefer to take those writings. But we never knew because like in the book of Revelation, it says the fallen angels will never repent. We know that in Lord of the Rings, they all kind of disperse, go underground and kill each other. So they are never given that opportunity, but that doesn't mean we can't, wax philosophical about it.
Do you want to answer this question? If you don't, that's fine. But Phaserist asked why then you are now atheist when you were brought up Catholic, and you said you were also a minister of some kind.
Yes,
you were not Catholic.
No, non-denominational.
Okay,
I was never a priest. Yes, I will tell you directly. It was a lack of personal accountability that I experienced within, I guess it's most sects of Christianity. My mother, we were raised Catholic, but my mother sort of floated around from church to church. When she heard something that she didn't like, she'd go to the next one over. And so we, as her kids, just went with her. So I have a great deal of experience with a lot of different denominations. And the common uniting thread with most of them seemed to be, in my experience, a lack of personal accountability. I am not willing to say that this is a staple of the denomination because I only experienced single churches within those denominations. But within those single churches, this was certainly a staple. So I didn't like the fact that when I didn't like how incredibly plastic or fake the confession felt when someone did something that they weren't supposed to, said sorry, did not suffer a just punishment. And this is part of the reason why I still sort of kind of am in tune with Catholicism. So it is very common to you can ask for forgiveness willy-nilly, free of any responsibility, free of any punishment in most non-Catholic sects, or at least in the churches of those sects that I attended. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that someone didn't have any accountability for their actions. And so that was what eventually turned into atheism, because I could not I could not reasonably, within my own moral framework, adhere to the worship of a God that did not require that of his worshipers. You have to be accountable for your own actions. If you do something bad, you have to own that. Yes, I did the action. Yes, it was bad. I accept the punishment. Or, try to avoid it, whatever. But at least you own the action. Yes, I did this. This was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. When you can just say things like, oh, well, the devil made me do it. Or you can just say things like, oh, well, I kneeled at the foot of my bed at the end of the day and I asked forgiveness for murdering 20 kids. And I'm fine now without any prescribed ritual, without any serious admission of fault, or without any penance. That's really what kind of planted that seed, and it eventually just grew. And I could not. And so after that happened, I sort of found my way through a bunch of, because I wasn't prepared to give up belief entirely when that first started. What I did was I tried to seek a religion or a practice where that.
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
Oh, am I?
Oh, no, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
You're back.
Mine froze too, so I guess it might have been server side.
Okay.
What did you hear up to?
That you weren't prepared to give up faith entirely.
Okay, I wasn't prepared to give up faith entirely, and so what I tried to do was find a faith that had personal accountability as a paramount tenet. Islam was entirely foreign to me, and so
Oh, did it happen again? Is that a server side break?
Can you hear me still?
Oh, no, I just hear you again. Okay, so maybe it was.
Okay, I don't know what's happening. I have full
Islam was completely foreign to you.
Yes, Islam was completely foreign to me, though I could have sought it there because they have a very proscriptive, ritualized practice.
Can anybody in the comments let us know which one are you getting? Are you breaking both of us, or is it are both of us freezing, or is it just James Bacon?
I'm seeing both of us freeze. I don't.
Okay.
What does chat say?
We'll see what the chat says. I just heard that. So anyway, so wait. So back to Islam. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh man. So Phaser Risk says that mine is working just fine, but James all of a sudden started freezing. Uh-oh. That's what I'm seeing.
What a bad time to start this nonsense. I hope that it works itself out. As far as I can tell, I have a very strong signal.
Okay.
Like I have 5G and I'm literally right next to the router.
Maybe it had something to do with the subject matter. Maybe it's YouTube.
Yeah, maybe. YouTube doesn't like it.
No.
So Islam. Could have found it in Islam because they have a very prescriptive, ritualized practice, but it was foreign to me, so I didn't find it there. And so I ended up looking around. I went to different pagan faiths. I eventually landed on Teutonic faith, Norse myth. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to break clean because this hasn't been practiced in a long time. We don't have all the details. Like any scholar of Vikings or the Teutonic era will tell you that there's like a vast tome of unknowns because they were an oral tradition, and so we just don't have it. So at that point I was like, you know what, let me just break clean here. I have my own moral framework. I can be personally accountable, and that's really that's what led me into an atheist worldview.
I do want to read this portion of the Catechism on the fall of the angels because
go ahead. Yeah, please do.
But before we do that, let's go to William Hupp right here, and then we'll go to the fall of angels, because William does say this might take a little bit of time to discuss, but William does say it might be useful to address specific storytelling examples from Lord of the Rings, such as the pity for Gollum, Faramir's attitude about the Southrons, Aragorn with the army of the dead. I think there are a lot of things to talk about there. And also when you're talking about the relationship between humanity and orcs, because Aragorn's relationship with the orcs, post the War of the Ring, relationship with what the orcs happens to the orcs, a lot of them fall into the crack of the earth and fall down.
Right.
is different from the humans who had fought for Sauron, which Aragorn is generally sympathetic to after that. So even Lord of the Rings does bring up this division. Do you want to talk about any of these examples in Lord of the Rings?
No, I think that this is actually great to bring up from this perspective, because it's there's pity, and it's just pity for the ill-ordered will. It's pitied for what Eru Ilúvatar had intended for these different peoples of Middle Earth versus what they ended up choosing for themselves sometimes, but frequently not choosing for themselves. Golem came under the dominion of the will of Melkor and Sauron. Well, I guess Sauron, but Melkor distantly. And I think that Aragorn's attitude, there's actually a sort of a famous interview with George R.R. Martin, and how he says, oh, well, we don't know how Aragorn behaved at the end of Lord of the Rings. He could have hunted all the orcs down and killed them. And it's like, well, if you get that read from the text, you just didn't really read the character of Aragorn. That's not something that he would ever do because of his compassion. He could have held the Whites of the Barrow Downs oaths not fulfilled, and he could have kept them as a personal undead army, but he chose to forgive them because he had that compassion, because they had finally met their well-ordered state. They went from being oath breakers to fulfilling that oath, and in the fulfillment of that oath became well-ordered and were forgiven and did pass on. I don't think that there's any real reason to believe that Aragorn would have hunted down and murdered orc babies, like Martin said.
Well, okay, this is not a completely well-developed thought, not a completely fully developed thought, but it's kind of the direction that I'm going with this. That it also seems to me like Martin is making some type of error when he asks, "Hey, do you kill orc babies in their cribs? Like, what about it seems like if you're an author and let me clarify, you're an author and you're using orcs to represent the demonic, not just another species of that's very human-like, like in, say, modern Dungeons and Dragons. But like, let's say whether you're a game master in a D&D game or you're a author who is writing this, and you are using orcs to represent the demonic in your story, you're never going to present the heroes or the PCs with a situation where you have baby orcs in their crib.
No.
That if you do that, you're crossing the streams. Now, you might do that if you've got a situation where you're in your world, the orcs are just another species that are just as human as we are. They just have green skin and tusks, and then you could have a war between humans and orcs, and then, what do you do with the orc babies? But if you're trying to tell something at the level where you're using the representation of the demonic, that's not something that's going to come up. If Tolkien did want Aragorn to have a situation where he's really got to deal with, do I kill something in its crib? I don't think he would have used orcs for that, because they even fall into the pit.
They're gone. They take care of themselves.
He would have done that with one of the humans that followed Sauron. What do you do? Because I don't think he would have necessarily not. I mean, he could have told that story. I don't think he would have been, just categorically opposed to it. But if he wanted to tell that story, he would have done it with a race of humans who had fallen under Sauron's sway. And then how do you handle their children and stuff like that? I don't think you even would have done it with orcs.
Right. I agree with that.
Let's see.
So we have more questions.
Do you see something in the comments we need to address right here?
I'm looking to see what we got here.
Let's go over here. So I'll bring this up to this, because this is
the catechism. Oh yeah, sure.
The catechism, and this also deals with how we deal with. I think we can go from there to something like the Book of Job and how we deal with good and evil in that kind of literature. But I thought this was interesting. So let's see what it says here: the fall of the angels. Because I went through, when I was interested in the fall of angels, I was talking to a number of different people, like ministers and priests of different denominations, and asking them about the status of fallen angels and the devil. And I got very different answers, and I thought that was fascinating. But this says, I don't think I ever read this before. It says, behind the disobedient choice of our first parents lurks a seductive voice opposed to God, which makes them fall into death out of envy. Scripture and the church's tradition see in this being a fallen angel called Satan or the devil. The church teaches that Satan was at first a good angel made by God. The devil and the other demons were indeed created naturally good by God, but they became evil by their own doing, which does seem to imply will on their part.
Yes.
Scripture speaks of the sin of these angels. This fall consists of the free choice. Oh, there it is. The free choice.
Yeah, a major pillar of Catholic thought or Catholic belief is free will. There is free will in every choice. Period.
Of the angels too.
Yes.
Who radically and irrevocably, I thought this was a fantastic word, who radically and irrevocably rejected God and his reign. So that's not a situation of redemption.
No.
So according to Catholic teaching, it seems then when you encounter the demonic, you're in a combative situation because you're not trying to, maybe I can convince it to do good.
Yes.
You're never going to be in that situation. That actually brings up, that's kind of like what I was talking about with the orcs right there. You're never going to be in a situation where you're like, maybe I could convince this demon to do good.
Well, if you use orcs to represent the demonic, then yes. I think everything is allegorical in writing. So if you want to use a ring as the ultimate evil, then you know. But if you want to use orcs as the ultimate evil or some other sentient species, then yeah, it becomes.
If you're doing that.
Yes, if you're doing that, yes.
We find a reflection of that rebellion in the tempter's words of our first parents. You will be like God. The devil has sinned from the beginning. He is a liar and the father of lies. It is the irrevocable character of their choice and not a defect in the infinite divine mercy that makes the angels' sin unforgivable. Well, that's fascinating.
Yes, essentially saying that because they are unrepentant to the very end, it is impossible for them to be redeemed.
That's basically what my father told me. My father is an Anglican priest.
Okay.
And so he had said that that their choice was forever, that you cannot redeem a fallen angel, that was his opinion as well. As
I think that I understand that, and I think this even came up with Robert in the comments a little bit earlier. He does mention that we know in the book of Revelation that they are unrepentant, and I think that that's where that view comes from. Like, because we know in the future they will remain unrepentant, they are irredeemable. So there's some sort of future sight with regard to the angels, but to question were they to be repentant, I think is a worthwhile thought exercise. You'll never get the answer, but there it is.
I also like this next sentence. There's no repentance for the angels after their fall, just as there is no repentance for men after death. So that's really interesting because is associating the fall of the angels with the death of men. It's once that happens,
that's
done.
Your that was it.
Done. Right. Now, see, when I went back and forth, now this says that they have will, so they chose to do this. Because originally when I asked my father, like I said, an Anglican priest, I said, did Lucifer have free will? And his original answer was no, that he did not. And then I went, well, if he didn't have free will, then he must have been created to create evil in the world. And he immediately backed away from that. Because that was not something that he was. So then he returned to an idea that, yes, okay, Lucifer must have had will.
Yes.
So he returned to that immediately after the confrontation with that. My grandfather, who is a Southern Baptist minister, Southern Baptist preacher, did you hear this? That he gave me an answer that I completely never heard before. That he was like, no, he doesn't. That the angels do not have free will, but that it was Lucifer who used his creativity to undermine God. And I had never heard that before. It was by the virtue of his being a creative angel. He was the creative angel, and he used creativity to undermine God and thus fall. I've never heard that before. How you do that without will, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he did say that, okay, angels have no free will, but that Lucifer was the creative angel and he used creativity to sin, which I've said before in other videos. This I thought was fantastically interesting because from a Southern Baptist perspective, what do you value? Do you value creativity? No, you don't value writing a poem or making a painting or things like that. If you're in rural Alabama, you value cutting firewood harvesting the planting and then harvesting and things like that. You don't really value creative. So I thought it was really interesting that he gave me creativity as something that was directly satanic. I thought that was interesting. Down here it says the power of Satan is nonetheless not infinite. It's only he is only a creature, powerful from the fact that he is a pure spirit, but still a creature. He cannot prevent the building up of God's reign. Although Satan may act in the world out of hatred for God and his kingdom in Jesus Christ, and although his action may cause grave injuries of spiritual nature and indirectly, even of a physical nature, to each man and to society, the action is permitted by divine providence, which is strength and gentleness guides, which strength and gentleness guides human and cosmic history. It is a great mystery that providence should permit diabolical activity. Okay, so that's an unknown right there too. So that's something we deal with all the time. It's a great mystery, it says, that providence should permit diabolical activity. But we know that in everything, God works for good, and those with those who love him. So that's basically just tossing back to the main question of the problem of evil that we don't know.
Yes.
This is a mystery as to why evil exists in the world. Okay, I'll take this down.
The problem of evil, as it were.
Heather says the angels have free will. He wanted to be God. That's who gave us free will. He wants to choose to us. Now, of course, if Cameron were here, he would point out that in
Pharaoh,
in Islam, the angels have no free will, and it's the jinn that have free will. So the angels have no will, and it's the jinn who do.
Yeah, so Heather G has said something else. She's actually said several things, but I just want to.
Okay, what do we need to pull
out? I can't.
I'm behind in the comments.
So she says there is parallels. It starts with there is parallels. It's just a little bit further up from, I think, her most recent comment.
Oh, okay, right here. Yeah, I got behind.
Yeah, there's parables.
I had my reading up, so I got behind. Okay, so
but for Bacon to reference the Bible like he was chosen as whack, I don't understand that. I think the entire conversation here has been, I haven't pretended to, know definitively. I'm completely happy to be wrong. And I've also admitted several times that I'm not Catholic, and these are not views that I personally hold currently. So maybe getting a little bit defensive here to address those comments, but
I'm not even sure what exactly that means. I'm not.
Yeah,
sure
I don't know what that means either. I mean, I'm happy to have you tell me what you mean, and I'm happy to address it. But let's see what else we have here. So Sable Phoenix at 9:02 p.m. because I think that's the only way I can. Here's the interesting question versus lack of personal accountability and justice.
Oh wait, Sable.
Mm-hmm.
At 9:02, actually, maybe 8:02 according to my time.
Oh yeah, yep. It's going to be 8:02. Sorry.
Okay, so is this it?
Yep, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So here's the interesting question
because I got behind in comments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did too. So here's the interesting question versus lack of personal accountability and justice. Say that someone committed mass murder, say 30 years ago, and for whatever reason they came forth to admit it with real remorse. What would the actual accountability say in that situation? Not just the Catholic perspective. I mean, I think the actual accountability is that you submit to the punishment of whatever the prevailing authority is. So if that's, the United States justice system, because I live in the U.S., and you need to go to trial, be found guilty, and put to death for that, then that's the only real accountability that you can take. I don't know if you can necessarily obviously you can't ask forgiveness of those who you've wronged, the murdered. And I don't think, you could try to go to the families of the individuals because you've changed their lives for the worse irrevocably with evil. That's, in my opinion, what the real accountability would be in that situation. But I don't know if that is good enough, right? So, like, if you're a mass murderer, is anything good enough? Is there an accountability that you can take? I think that's a good question.
Well, that's what people are talking about Darth Vader in here as an example because of that. I went through like, can you be Darth Vader and then save your son and get Sable Phoenix? That was Sable Phoenix.
Oh yeah, I see.
That's what you're talking about right here.
Darth Vader was responsible for the death of millions.
Yet save his own son was enough to save him. How? Why? How? That's a pretty reasonable critique. It kind of got around that by having him die.
Yes. Yeah.
And you hear this idea of redemption through death, which they kind of wanted to do with like Kylo Ren again, right? He died, right? But because it's very easy and clean from a story perspective to say, well, yes, he can have this moment with his son and then be dead, and we don't actually have to have him to deal with him coming back and having to actually face criminal charges or deal with what he's done or something like that. It's a very clean ending to a story like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you can ever reasonably excuse Vader for what he did, or if he's ever able to, reasonably excuse himself personally. Because that's, if we're talking about personal accountability, then how can he be accountable after he's died? I mean, he's a Force ghost, so maybe this is something that he wrestles with for the rest of eternity. I don't think I have a good answer.
Christopher says, do you respond to comments? Of course, yes. We respond to comments all the time on Table Talk. And we've been responding. We can't respond to every comment. But because there are a lot of comments coming in tonight on a bunch of different platforms that we're streaming on. But yes, there's a lot of stuff going on. So we're not going to be able to respond to every comment. But I'm paying attention as things are coming by. So from the literary perspective and dealing with this, what are your thoughts on the Book of Job? Because that seems to be like one of the books that deals a lot with good and evil, and this idea of like why do bad things happen to people? Which we just read was like a mystery. Why is that?
Yeah.
What is and that's a fascinating book to me, because we have this character Satan who's operating within the court of heaven and appears to be given some authority to do something to Job. And this is clearly a story that's trying to explain something about the human condition. What are your thoughts on that? On
Job?
Yeah.
And free will and evil?
As a small question.
So, it's not a small question. So let me organize my thoughts here. Satan approaches God and says, I bet that your most faithful servant will abandon you if he wasn't as affluent or as blessed with children or as rich or as possessed of property as he was. And then God returns and says, go mess with him. We'll see. We'll see who really wins out. So that, I think, is the issue that's like, because God gives the permission for the evil to happen on Job, and how I guess do you approach that? I think that I can construct a jigsaw. I can say that, well, evil comes from free wills other than God's, and I'll say moral evil. Moral evil comes from free wills other than God's. So, because there are, natural disasters that can be called evil. In fact, there's a term used in the Bible that means evil that's used interchangeably for both moral evil and natural disasters. It's in Isaiah, among other places. But so free wills come, or if moral evil comes from free wills other than God's, and God created creatures with free will, then it's not necessarily God who created the evil. He created the potential for evil in the creature with free will's ability to choose. But I don't know how satisfying an answer that is. I don't know how satisfying an answer that is.
I remember when taking a look at the Book of Job, that the idea of God giving permission to Satan to do these things to Job was called into question when I was speaking to my grandfather, who was the Southern Baptist preacher. Mm-hmm. He actually called into question the particular translation of the Bible that I had. because the one that I was reading, like when Satan says, but now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, what I was reading at that moment to my grandfather was, very well, then all he has is in your power. Just go and lay a hand on his person. But do not lay a hand on his person.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
But the part of that translation that he had a problem with was he said that he did not think that very well was correct. And according to this one, I'm looking at this right now. So this happens to be the New King James Version, which says, and the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. And so that was the particular translation because my grandfather was like, no, it's behold. It's not very well. It's behold. And so he was saying that word behold means that it's not a grant of permission. That he was telling Satan, behold, actually look at the situation, that Job is in your power. Behold, all that he has is in your power.
Okay.
So my grandfather dealt with this by denying that God was giving permission by rejecting the translation of very well. He was saying that there was something innate about Job that gave the devil, or gave Satan, in this case, Satan, power over him that even Satan himself didn't realize, and that God was just bringing this to his attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting and probably perfectly valid view. I'd like to, really to get to the bottom of this, you have to go back to the original language, and then you have to see what all of the different translations that can come from it are. And then you have to see how it was localized, which we probably don't have the time to do here. I don't speak Latin and I don't speak Hebrew, though we could probably get a translation readily enough, but I'd have to go back to the text. That very well may be a valid view, and I'm perfectly happy to allow that.
It's one that I hadn't heard of, and I always do like what you're saying. I don't read Latin. I don't read ancient Greek. I don't read ancient Hebrew or anything like that myself either. And so I'm often kind of skeptical when people say, "Oh, but if you actually read the whatever, then it means this," because I don't have any particular way of checking that. Maybe they're correct, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
But it would take a lot for me to actually try to figure out whether or not what I think was a valid translation or not. But I thought it was interesting that he brought up those differences in those words. So, I guess there's a way around everything. What I would have perceived as a rather direct grant of permission, according to other translations, is not.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. If I can just go back to Heather G for a moment to address what she said.
Sure. Which one do we need to go to?
I think the most recent comment, you believe in the fictional movies.
Okay. You believe in the
fictional movies. I enjoy these movies, but you don't believe this ordained word. All these things come back to God. So I am going to do a little bit of interpretation on your comment. I think what she's saying is that as someone who doesn't believe, how dare I be the one to represent the Bible in this conversation? I get that. Mea culpa. I don't think there's anything I can say to justify me in this role in this conversation right now. I guess judge me as you will. And earlier on you asked if you could pray for me. Sure, I'd be honored if you'd pray for me. But I understand the difficulty you might have with me being the one representing this conversation. So,
well, and it's not a debate or anything like that. It's just it's all a discussion. I like to count all of Table Talk as a discussion rather. Somebody. James is not here to defend Catholicism.
Yeah, no, I'm not here to defend Catholicism. If I have interpreted your comment correctly in that how dare I be the one to represent, then I don't know exactly how I can ever awash with that aside from returning to being a believer. And maybe that will happen one day. I don't know, but there are days where I certainly regret having lost my faith. And yes, you can pray for me, but I just don't know in this moment how to make amends for that. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you suffering through this. I appreciate your opinion, but I cannot remediate, and I apologize.
Let's take this out to a higher level, to a high level again. Like, so if you're trying to write a story and you want to tackle ideas of good and evil on a grand scheme, maybe you are trying to tell something about a story of a fall, maybe the fall like that of Lucifer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that studying the Catholic Catechism and its approach to this could help us craft a story that's meaningful?
Oh, okay. Well, I think that, and this might get back to the most recent comment that Sable Phoenix made.
Okay.
There's two of them. I guess it starts with the first.
This one right here.
Yes, there's this reductive form of reasoning that's very common nowadays, that if you're not adherent to a particular belief identity group, you can't comment on it, and that's such a false dichotomy. So I think what you can actually do to make it meaningful, at least in this regard, is to, if you're going to fall back on the Catholic versions of good and evil while you're writing a story, then inherent to that view is the idea that a human being is not evil, but their actions can be evil, or at the very least not good. And so if you can give that sort of perspective to people who are reading your stories or watching your movies, then you might actually be able to crack this shell that Sable Phoenix has mentioned, because I do think that there is there's a drastic divide between a wide variety of views and opinions, or either for or against. There's no real gray area. I think that if you can sort of use the view to get the gray area into your story and show that there is, like, you like to read, or you like to write falls, you like to tell stories of the fall, redemptive stories are just as valid. And if you can show someone being redeemed, now, I guess in a modern political climate, they'd have to be redeemed without taking the other person's opinion. They would just have to become redeemed, I guess, in the eyes and in public opinion. But I think that it's a worthwhile endeavor to tell that story. I think it would be very meaningful, especially in a modern context.
Yeah, with, I guess, pulling back to the very beginning, like I can think of a bunch of different potential stories and things that you could deal with if you are, or tell if you're dealing with the difference between the object, the intention, and the circumstances.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of morality
deal
that you can certainly tell with those.
I don't hear that in necessarily other people's approach, but man, you could build a story around somebody thinking that they were doing very well when it actually doing good, when actually they have done something like enable somebody, and in the end it's just ended up disastrous. And then you're going to ask the question, was that good anyway? And it could probably even contrast different characters about, like, the person who really is giving tons of money to the poor but for terrible reasons, and what is that? So even setting that up, if you're going to explore that, which is a scholarly kind of approach to the subject, and then if you can start to set up different characters or things to deal with these different elements of what it means to do something that's good, I think that would be a really interesting way to bring this in.
I agree. I think there's a bunch of different ways that you could go for it. I mean, what I said is just an example based on what Sable Phoenix had commented, but I think that there are already major stories, for example, Lord of the Rings, that had been informed by the Catholic view of good and evil. It might not be present in the text directly, and it might conflict with other letters that he wrote with regard to the orcs and what their substance was and how they could have potentially be redeemed versus not. But in my, personal most favorite versions of those, of his letters, I like the one where they were fashioned from elves, which were fashioned from starlight. And so they are ultimately at their core capable of good, because what they are made from is good, and that they were twisted. I think that them not really having a choice in being evil, we can better explore that they may have had a choice in being evil. They were just, from the moment that they were, foisted into the world, they were sort of under the oppression of Sauron and sort of had to do what he said or suffer. They're already suffering. So there's a whole philosophical bend that we can go off on regarding the orcs and whether or not they could have chosen or were not given an opportunity to choose. But even still, I like the one where they are redeemable. That's the one that I prefer. And I think it's because it sort of issues forth that moral of the individual not being evil, though they were conceived in evil by evil, that they are still sort of redeemable. Which is, I don't know, maybe that runs contrary to, maybe it runs contrary to popular belief. Maybe it runs contrary to even Catholic belief. But I think that you can glean that from at least the catechism. So that's where I fall.
Well, so we said we'd go for about 90 minutes and we've got an hour and 25 right here. Let me ask a question about Table Talk itself and a meta-analysis of Table Talk, and what Table Talk is and what it could be. This has obviously been actually very popular Table Talk. We had as many as I believe 23 people watching live.
Oh, wow.
Which is a lot. Now that was the peak, but there was often 18. So we've had a lot of people, and we've had a lot of comments coming in. On a 6-hour stream, we have more in raw numbers, but this was a lot of comments that were coming in across all the different platforms, like per minute that we were talking. So this was clearly a popular topic. And this is Table Talk number 67. And which is a lot of Table Talk, and it's kind of changed and, been different things. And we talk about different things. We do story review. We, talk about Napoleon and things like that. I interview different people. I was wondering what you, and also people in the comments, please put this in the comments as well in this final few minutes, what you like best about Table Talk, because I thought this was a fantastic conversation. These kinds of conversations I really would like to have on Table Talk. And I do like having the kind of focus on generally about geekdom and gaming and storytelling and things like that, rather than just, hey, let's have a philosophical discussion. I've received a little bit of commentary, not criticism, but commentary, and that there have been a variety of different kinds of things on the show. But on the other hand, I kind of think that's kind of its strength, and that having the movie reviews, having these kinds of discussions, but also talking with people who are also YouTubers who are doing things and creating things is good. What do people think about that? What is the direction, James? What do you think about that?
Personally, I love all of it. I think that you have myself excluded, I think that you have a very wide array of really erudite opinions and scholarship. I think with Cameron, and I think with Brianna, and I think with Doug, and I think with yourself, you all hit from different perspectives. Doug's an author. Cameron is actually working in Hollywood. You are an author and you aspire to production, and Brianna aspires to direction. Is a director. So I think, you are a producer. So you'd say you aspire to Hollywood, but you are a producer. Brianna's a director. You're a writer. Doug's a writer. So you have a really solid group from which to hit a wide variety of topics. And in the event that you feel like you maybe need coverage, like you have the Christian on, you have the practicer of Judaism, you have the Muslim on, I'm a fake Catholic. I'm not a Catholic. And I know that I got preachy at times here, not really preachy, but I kind of came off that way because I guess we had to get into it. I think that it's great. I love the movie talks. I love the philosophy talks. I love the gaming talks.
I hope that through all of that, I hope that through all of that, especially as we go forward and stuff like that, that we end up with enough of a through line thread that it still seems consistent as a show.
No, I think it does. I think it does, because when, we're not talking about Catholicism. We're talking about Catholicism en route to discussing how that view applies to stories. And it's the same thing with movies. And it's the same thing when you discussed, Islam or Judaism or any other. It's a matter of going, okay, well, I want to talk about good and evil in my story. Where's a good spot to get an idea into the good and evil dichotomy? It's like, well, there's some pretty good sources there.
Where do you want to stand philosophically? Here's here's one particular stance you could look at.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not just, like this episode 67 is only the most recent in a series that you've put together about this way of thought and good and evil and perspective and philosophy and religion. And so I think that it definitely demonstrates there's really no favoritism whatsoever. Like, I'm not even a Catholic. I feel like I constantly have to say that because I'm now maybe a bit defensive. But like, it's a matter of getting the information, getting the philosophical view, applying it to storytelling. And I think that you do a very fair, very even way of making that possible. And I absolutely love it. I came here for the OGL nonsense, and I stuck around, and I think I actually was slow to get into the table talks. I think there were several table talks that I actually missed or overlooked in the beginning because I was really just interested in the OGL stuff. But then the OGL stuff turned into looking at games in general, and then there were the more general topics that you approach in the grind, and then you would have a table talk, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure, let's see what these people have to say about this movie, or let's see what these people have to say about this philosophy. And it really it fed well from one into the other.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll say this too. John says Table Talk is the best show on YouTube. Well, thank you, John.
I will also say that.
I hope that gets out there to a lot more people. I would love to see a conversation about the continuing evolution of RPGs in the wake of D&D's cultural decline post OGL. Discussions about that, I think, is also, that would be really interesting. If you know of someone who I should interview to specifically talk about that, the Discord or somebody, let me know. If you have, I've got a long list of potential topics. I was talking to James about this before the show. There's a whole bunch of topics and things like that we could talk about. But if you know of somebody who's like with a topic and a person, do let me know, because I've got a list of table talk topics. That is a really good topic, John. And John says also a follow-up on world building with a discussion on realism, its place in storytelling and fantasy. I think that follow-ups on world building is also really something that we should do. When we just said, hey, let's do a show on world building, I was like, oh my God, how do we do that? Because that's such a gigantic topic. That conversation actually I thought was fantastic. But because it was broad. I think we covered everything. If you were just going to do one show on world building, actually, I thought it went very well. But now I think the thing to do is take additional topics under that umbrella, and realism. That would be one of them. Yes, we could totally do a 5-hour of this. On a light note to end this, Phaser Wrist asks, "What's James' favorite Hero Quest character to play?"
I'm a dwarfy dwarf.
Dwarf.
I'm a dwarfy dwarf.
Robert says, "I love hearing the points of others, such as Bacon here, especially me being Bacon." John said, I'm just going back over to this. James, fascinating discussion. Glad to hear your thoughts. Thanks for discussion, both you and Heath. Thank you.
Thank you.
The show, there was a show. Yes, so that's the best. That's the best way for the whole show to go when people are discussing in the chat too, because the chat's a big part of this. Jordan Fuzz says RPG with DBJ has on his channel plenty of discussions about good and evil as well. I want to interview him soon. I keep meaning to reach out to him. RPG by DBJ. DBJ needs to come on the channel soon. Yes. Needs to be here soon. I want to talk to him. Yeah, he's talked to Doug. Doug was on his show. So yes,
I saw that interview. It was pretty great. Jordan Fuzz also says, I like it best when my comments get mentioned in the stream. So
there you go. Yeah. Wait a minute. I thought I brought that up. Yes. So Jordan Fuzz, there you go. Your comment got mentioned in the stream. I meant to bring that one up, but I guess I didn't. Yes. More cross-pollination. We need to have some more streamers on here as well. Yes, I think you're right. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's opinions on that. So, all right. So it seems like we're doing good. I'm going to do a whole reevaluation of the whole Table Talk after 100 episodes, which is still, a lot of episodes away. But I was like, what if we got to 100 episodes and then see what goes on? All right. Anything else we need to wrap up with, or do you think that's about it?
No, I think it's a major topic, and I'm happy to discuss offline in Discord. I'm Bacon in Discord. You can get a hold of me in the Raven Keep I don't know, it's Discord. I'm just going to say the word Discord again. You get a hold of me in Raven Keep and, message me directly if you like. I'm happy to talk about it in public if you want other people to contribute. I think I should hopefully make myself available. Regardless of your questions, I'm pretty open. So if you want to, ask me whatever, I'm happy to.
There is the Discord link. So there you go. So everybody, please do then I guess come by. This will be a replay, Scarface with Brienne. I will talk about the fall and stuff like that and corruption arcs in that. That's on Sunday. That's a premiere. Love to have you there. Then Tuesday, we'll be talking about the Christmas story. So I guess we are on kind of a religion theme at the moment. So the Christmas story, this will probably also be a good one. The Christmas story will be coming up. We'll be talking about the Matthew and Luke, and then the literary perspective and what it means. And then I'll also be talking about the trial of St. Gabriel and how I adapted a Christmas story. And I would love to have you there. And I will send out, if you would like a copy of that before the conversation to get ahead, I will send that out. Even though the Kickstarter won't be done, I'll send that out this weekend so that everybody can read it.
The trial of St. Gabriel is fantastic, and I recommend that everyone read it. I read one of the first drafts, so it's changed since then, but I've only recently gotten into the changed version, and it's just as good as when I read it the first time.
James is one of the reviewers. Good Lord, this dialogue is incredible. I'm severely impressed. Incredible. I felt this in my gut. So
oh, stop. Those are comments that I literally wrote to you in a PDF, and I feel like it's like so poorly articulated. I'm happy to be on the page though, so thank you for that.
All right. Thank you everybody for being here who was here live. Your conversation. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everybody's comments, but it was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed talking to each other in the chat. The comments are a huge part of what makes this show fantastic. Talking to everybody and the things that you guys add, that's incredible. Also, everybody who watches on replay, thank you so much for watching as well. You can put comments down below. I mean, I do read the comments that come through here. I get an email every time a comment is posted. I hope one day I have so many comments I have to turn that off. But for the moment, I still get an email every time somebody posts a comment. So I do look at all the comments. So if you have something to add to the conversation or things like that, I will definitely read comments on there. So
can I sneak one more comment in while we're talking about it? Fizzer says, what does James think of the current trend to make all villains empathetic and relatable in movies? My answer is this. I think that everything in a story is allegorical usually. And so I think that sometimes you just need a representation of the evilest, darkest evil that you can muster in order to tell your story or to impart a moral. I think that when we drop that altogether, we are losing something societally. Whether you need to use another individual or an orc or a group of people or a ring to stand in for that evil, I think that we will all lose something lamentable when we do, if we do, escape that type of villain.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I agree with that. I actually had talked to Cameron about that. That was like, do you lose something by not having black and white? If everything becomes gray, which is kind of a trend, well, let's make everything gray. That's actually on the subject of what I was saying. Is there value in having black and white if you're trying to represent the heroic approach to the demonic? Well, then that's what you're representing. So you've got black and white. We don't need gray orcs. We just need demonic orcs.
Yeah. And sometimes, man, sometimes you just need a demon. Yeah. So go ahead, put a demon, whatever you want to represent that demon.
It's not always.
You should probably be tasteful with it, but
it's not always. The variety of different kinds of storytelling, but you're right. We've gotten away from that. And that may be for cultural reasons. That I think it has something to do with our relationship with the demonic. And I mean, as in, maybe not having a good one, and that's so. Yeah, I agree.
Well, hey, Jordan Fuzz, if you disagree, message me on Discord. I'm happy to talk about it. Maybe you'll change my mind.
All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much. This was fantastic. So yes, maybe we end up with follow-up conversations as well, because I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this conversation. So, all right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. I will see everybody tomorrow morning on Heath's Geekverse, the Heath's Geekverse channel for the morning grind at 9:30. And then we'll be seeing you for the replay and then also for the Christmas discussion on Tuesday. So lots of stuff coming down the pipe. Later, everybody. Thank you, James.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.